Well, let's start with the still developing breaking news. President Trump, Melania Trump, both positive with coronavirus at this hour. Quarantining in the White House. Breaking news is stunning. And I mean, if you just look at what has unfolded over the past 24 hours, the Dow futures right now falling 400 points just this morning after admitting that he had tested positive for coronavirus. He tweeted, "Tonight at FLOTUS and I tested positive for COVID-19. We will begin our quarantine immediately. We will get through this together." I just think how stunning this is. There's a lot of questions here. So the bigger questions, I'm sure you all know the story by now, that President Trump has COVID. We don't know at this hour if he's showing signs, if he's asymptomatic or symptomatic. Melania Trump apparently is asymptomatic. This comes on the heels of Hope Hicks, who is a White House advisor, one of the closest advisors to President Trump, senior staff member aboard Air Force One and Marine One en route to that rally together. They were very close. It is well known that in his circle, if you wear a mask, you will get mocked. And not just by him, but when you're meeting with the president, when you're together and you're in the room together, you just don't wear a mask. It's commonplace with the president that you will be mocked. You'll be that wimpy guy in the corner wearing the mask. And so most people around the president just don't wear masks. Now, sure, they get tested pretty much every day. His senior staff does. Vice President Mike Pence gets tested every day. But apparently, when you're in a room full of people, all not wearing masks at rallies, traveling in tight quarters, and someone has coronavirus, that's how quickly it spreads. We know that Kimberly Guilfoyle had it and had to be quarantined. Now Hope Hicks has it, and she began feeling mild symptoms during the Air Force One ride home from that rally in Minnesota. Now the big question is here's the big question I have is when did we know that Hope Hicks had this? And did they keep it under wraps? Did they keep it quiet? Now, according to Caitlin Collins and other reporters who cover the White House closely, on Thursday, there was knowledge that Hope Hicks had contracted the coronavirus at the White House. We found out yesterday about that information. And so Hope Hicks under quarantine, the president, Melania Trump, under quarantine in the White House. We also just got breaking news that the president is going to address the nation tonight. He's going to address the nation tonight to show that he's in good spirits. And he's going to show us all how well he looks. Now, he is in prime condition for someone who would be affected by this virus, 74 years old. 74 years old. He's obese. And according to reports from Bloomberg, they said that they knew about this on Wednesday, didn't report it. What's amazing is that Hope Hicks had felt these symptoms. They knew about it and still went to this rally. If they knew that Hope Hicks was infected, they let her get on Air Force One. They let her get on Marine One. They let her go to a rally. Does she not disclose that to the president? Is it not a big deal? Do they say, it's 99% recovery rate, so who cares? How close do you get to the president? So this unfolded just hours after the Tuesday night debate. Now, remember this from the presidential debate? This moment, of course, pops up in my head. As soon as I heard this news, I thought of the Tuesday night debate when President Trump said this about Joe Biden wearing a mask and making fun of him for wearing a mask all the time. Listen.
Trump, you have begun to increasingly question the effectiveness of masks as a disease preventer. And in fact, recently you have cited the issue of waiters touching their masks and touching plates. Are you questioning
I think
the
masks
efficacy
are okay.
of
You have to
masks?
understand, if you look, I have a mask right here. I put a mask on, when I think I need it. Tonight, as an example, everybody's had a test and you've had social distancing and all of the things that you have to, but I wear masks when needed. When needed, I wear masks.
Okay, let me ask.
I don't wear masks like him. Every time you see him, he's got a mask. He could be speaking 200 feet away from it. He shows up with the biggest mask I've ever seen. I will say this.
Vice President Biden, go ahead, sir.
Look, the way to open businesses is give them the wherewithal to be able to open. We provided money. The Congress.
But I was asking you, sir, about masks.
Well, masks make a big difference. His own head of the CDC said if we just wore masks between now, everybody wore masks and social distance between now and January, we'd probably save up to 100,000 lives. It matters.
And they've also said the opposite. They've also said the opposite.
No serious person said the opposite.
No serious person said the opposite. Well, actually, that is true. But Dr. Fauci did say the opposite a number of months ago at the beginning of this thing. He knew that masks would prevent coronavirus. And yet he told us, well, not a big deal. We don't all need to be walking around with it. He withheld that information. And then Dr. Fauci kind of walked that back, a month or so ago. But he's there mocking Joe Biden for wearing a mask all the time. And when he goes to these rallies, he says, look, it only affects the elderly. Only affects the elderly. He's elderly. He's also obese. Obese elderly. Like that is like two of the biggest problems that he's facing right now. If he was healthy and didn't eat McDonald's every day, he might be in a better position to fight this thing. So, folks, this is an unbelievable opportunity for this White House to try to show some level of competency throughout this, and they have been unable to. I think what to me stands out the most is one of the big criticisms, of course, against President Trump is that his administration has been a failure on the coronavirus response. And the fact that members of his White House routinely are getting coronavirus, and now the President of the United States has coronavirus, shows this administration's inability to fight this virus. And this will be the narrative now for the rest of this campaign. 32 days left. The President of the United States contracting coronavirus. There's a lot of questions I have, though. There's a lot of questions I have about what happens next. The campaign timeline right now. So as we look at the campaign timeline, this is the big question I have. What's going to happen next with this campaign? So President Trump will not be able to go to events. President Trump will not be able to go out in public. He's under quarantine for the next 2 weeks. 32 days left. 32 days left until this election, folks. 32 days. That means that in the most crucial of battleground states, with just a few weeks remaining, the President of the United States will not be able to go and campaign. Wrap your head around that. This is the most important time during a campaign with these last few weeks. And now the president will have to be under lock and key and not be able to be out there at these big rallies. Are they going to send Pence instead? Well, come on. Who wants to see Mike Pence give a speech? Guys like watching milquetoast, right? Boring compared to a Trump rally. Nevertheless, he's been out there campaigning. There is some question as to whether or not Vice President Mike Pence has been in contact with President Trump, but his travel schedule has kept him separated from Trump at this point. He was in Georgia on Wednesday and Iowa yesterday. He gets tested every day. He tweeted out love and prayers to the Trumps. But the Pence team at this hour still has not issued a statement providing more information on the Vice President's tweet. Beyond that tweet, that's it. That's all we know is that, hey, we're happy for you. We're hoping that you're doing well, Mr. President. He's going to address the nation tonight. President Trump will. All eyes will be on that address. Doctors will be watching. How is his breathing? Everyone's going to be focused to see, is he doing okay? Let's talk about Wall Street and what the markets are doing now. Dow futures right now, again, down 400 points. And it is roiling the markets because if there's one thing that the markets can't stand, it's uncertainty. And so when we don't know who's going to be president of the United States because of coronavirus, Wall Street responds. What will be canceled? What events will be canceled? Vice President Biden, for his matter, is continuing to campaign. An advisor to President Trump, off the record, on background, told Mike Allen, this is an advisor to President Trump. He said this, it's hard to know, but likely this hurts Trump as it makes COVID the big issue and points to the failure of his deep denial approach. Again, this is an advisor to Trump saying this. He says, I doubt it moves many voters either way, but I think Trump has a very narrow path to victory to 270 electoral votes. I have his best map at a 269 electoral college tie. I think that this is that is a low probability map, meaning that of President Trump right now, this is an advisor to President Trump saying that Trump's best chance of winning the presidency has him at a tie, which of course, then it gets thrown to Congress. Nancy Pelosi has already been having meetings with colleagues, preparing them for a possible tie. Okay, let's go back to like writing the narrative of 2020. Can you imagine if there's a tie in this election? But that's a Trump advisor saying that that's a low probability that his best effort equals a tie. It's like my Philadelphia Eagles last week, tying the Cincinnati Bengals. Come on, awful. Now what happens? I mean, I'm frankly sort of speechless by this. And this is one of those rare sort of historical moments that we're sitting in right now, because constitutionally, there's a number of things that can happen here. Under Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution's 25th Amendment, which was adopted in 1967 after the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963, so that there would not be this constitutional turmoil. For instance, what happens to a president if he's incapacitated? Like what if JFK survived but had to be on life support? Does Vice President Johnson ever take over? Or does we just have a president who's in a vegetative state? And we had to figure that out. We should have had it back during Woodrow Wilson when he was basically in a vegetative state and his wife basically was president of the United States. So they should have done it a long time before then. Anyway, 1967. So Trump could declare in writing that he has an inability to discharge the duties of his office. He'd have to write it down and say, I, President Donald Trump, have an inability to discharge the duties of my office. And he would hand the presidency over to Vice President Pence for as long as he needed to. This has happened 3 times in American history since 1967. It happened under Reagan when he was getting a cancer screening to remove I think it was like a lesion on his kidney, I think, right? And then we also had it happen twice under George W. Bush. And Dick Cheney was president for a few hours. He discharged the presidency, so he was acting president for a few hours. So if he is incapacitated in the hospital because of coronavirus, he could discharge the duties of the presidency to Vice President Pence. I have to say, I had a feeling that this might happen at some point during this presidency. Didn't you? You know, Vice President Pence, here's a guy who would never become president on his own. He's too conservative. He suffered from the Governor Mike Huckabee syndrome. That, you might do well among evangelicals, but the majority of Republicans aren't going to vote for a guy like that. They just won't. And the only way he becomes president is if something like this happens. There's also the 25th Amendment, which would allow his cabinet, President Trump's cabinet, to basically go to Congress and say, hey, we don't think our president is all there, that he's not there anymore. And we need to invoke the 25th Amendment, Section 4, which would then put somebody else in charge of the presidency, put Vice President Pence. Those same members of the cabinet and Congress would then have to agree that President Trump is back again and then remove Pence from that position. But these are real options right now, folks. So if you're just waking up and tuning in, President Donald Trump and his wife, Melania Trump, positive for coronavirus. And a lot of questions as to who was around the president. How many people surrounded the president when he contracted the virus? How many people showed up near him? And the list is pretty extensive. I mean, I'm going to go through some of the list here if I can. President Trump was with Representative Jim Jordan. These are all people, by the way, who traveled with the president. Alice Marie Johnson, Robert O'Brien, Rudy Giuliani, Ivanka Trump, Mark Meadows, his White House chief of staff. Jared Kushner was also on that flight with Hope Hicks, sitting right next to her, by the way. Donald Jr. didn't fly back with him, but was there on the way there. He was at the debate. He was in that rally. Kimberly Guilfoyle once again. Eric Trump, Laura Trump, Tiffany Trump, Derek Lyons, Bill Stepien, who's his campaign manager, Jason Miller, Kayleigh McEnany, Gabe Hurt, Dan Scavino, Stephen Miller. All of these people were with the president. I'm sure the tests are happening quickly today, fast and furiously. And we're going to be keeping our eyes on this. This is just a stunning story. Okay, we just got word that the vice president has tested negative. So Vice President Pence has tested negative. And so did his wife. You know, the thing is, so the president traveled to this fundraiser on Thursday after knowing about Hope Hicks. He last night on Hannity's show said, you know, it's difficult. You know, all these people, the members of the military, firefighters, you know, want to come up to you and hug you and kiss you because they love me. That's what he said last night on Hannity. So how many more people were infected by the president shaking their hands? Why did the White House keep this from the reporters who were on the plane with the White House staff members? Hope Hicks didn't tell anybody. She didn't tell reporters who were on the plane. Why did the White House keep this information from the reporters in that room and the American people? President and the First Lady right now are both well at home, according to the White House doctor, White House medical team.